So, um, I decided I'm going to do a voiceover to kind of give everyone a play-by-play of what I was thinking while I was playing. Uh, this is a plus 14. This week it is Sanguine, Volcanic, Fortified, Thundering. I started the recording a bit late. Here I'm running the pretty standard Shadow Covenant setup. I don't know the dungeons quite well enough, so I'm playing a more reactive style of healing disc. Here, the corrupt living waters are awful. Uh, Basically, just try to LOS the ripple, I think it's called, as much as possible. Yeah, toxic ripple. I missed it there, but yeah, pretty much trying to spread my dot as much as possible. I'm not doing nearly good enough of a job of keeping my power word shield on cooldown. Uh, this is kind of a sloppy run, and I do end up dying over here. It's a rough way to start, but the run gets a bit smoother after that. This first pull and the last pull before the last boss is pretty much the worst part of this entire dungeon. So we're back just immediately into Rapture because I know the Corrupted Living Water is still up. So I know we're still going to take a ton of damage. Um, as you can see, still just getting hit extremely hard. Life gripping to just get the thundering out of the way right away. And dispelling the ripple as fast as I can. So here I made a bit of a mistake. I went up and I think I pulled him. Um, oh no, I didn't. Apparently the tank pulled him. But yeah, I was at 35% mana, so it's pretty rough. So I'm pretty much gonna use my Shadow Fiend as early as possible to just regen as much mana as I possibly can. Here I missed a shield on our Demon Hunter, but yeah. Now we're going around. So with this boss, you can actually know when it's going to pop up and knock you up. If you just count the little splashes, it'll be three red little splashes and then a big one. So, for example, next time he does it, 1, 2, 3, and now a big one as I walked right into it. Um, After that, the boss really doesn't do too much. Here, just popped Schism as a DPS cooldown, largely because there's not really much AoE damage, group damage. It's all single target damage here, so no real sense of saving it for just the AoE heal. So you see here, though, I am really starting to run on fumes. Really hoping that it'll be over soon. I unfortunately couldn't save him because I didn't even have mana for a shield. But it's okay, so we get the boss. And I believe that's one of the very few deaths here. So, the next part is nothing too crazy. Still behind on mana, but the tank isn't noticing. So I'm going to try to find a moment to drink here. but it doesn't always really work out. You can see it's kind of just chain pulling. Here I managed to sit for all of 1 second before I get pulled into aggro, and these two, they put this dot, which is really bad to not have mana for because they put two of them, so you can only dispel one at a time, and the other person you just need to heal through, which normally isn't that big of a deal, but when you're just like running on fumes like this, it's really tough to keep people alive. You see here, I'm like pressing spells, but I just don't have the mana to get anything out. So, staying back here to avoid getting pulled into combat. This next pack is a single mob, so I'm just going to let the tank handle that. Doesn't really do too much, so team should be fine. Tank should pretty much sustain it, no problem. There we go. So this fish has one ability needs to be interrupted, but then it does splash, which splash hurts real bad. So that's where I'm popping Covenant for. Not really sure what happened here, where we have two positive thundering debuffs, but neither of them gets stunned. I'm not really sure how that happened. Um, so this one just it heals, does a good amount of damage. Not too bad compared to the other trash in here. It just has a lot of HP. It's fortified weak, so. I am not running any set bonuses here either. I do have the two-piece, but I lose quite a bit of haste with the two-piece, so I just don't really think it's worth it. Once I get the four-piece, then yeah, all haste is kind of out the window. That the four-piece will, with Wheel and Woe, will give you a massive amount of extra shielding. It basically just doubles the effectiveness of Wheel and Woe, and nearly. So I was doing some math on it, and you should be critting for like 100k power word shields. So if you're rapturing with that, like you will just be doing massive shields, and it'll be super powerful in raid, especially with the crit trinket you can get from, I believe, Court of Stars. Because then you can just set up your crit, and when you rapture, you should be critting fairly often, and just set your team up with massive shields. In raid, I actually use the trinket when I use my evangelism to make my attacks crit more, so you get more healing rather than shielding. But in Mythic Plus, it'll definitely be before on Rapture. And it's a minute and a half cooldown, which is exactly the same as Rapture. So you can basically just macro it in. Alright, Strife and Peril. You just switch back and forth. They really don't do much. There's just some like ticking AoE damage, but nothing that intense. It's pretty easy to heal through. There you go. Taking it over to DPS since I'm not doing that much here. Throwing in a Rapture for good measure. As we get further in the fight, I'd rather just use these cooldowns. The trash right after this is not very demanding, So if I can just use it, get a little bit more DPS out, why not? It'll be up before the trash, before the third boss, where we will need it. There you go. There's some talents. Trying to see if there's some mana node I missed because I kept on feeling like I was low on mana this entire run. Um, but I also was shadow coveting and using mind games a lot more. So tends to happen. So while there's some downtime, um, I'm gonna be posting some more videos, more mostly discipline. But I want to know if y'all would like to see some raid, some more Mythic Plus pushing, just general talent setups I run. Some Do you want me to do a guide on discipline? I've been playing discipline for a few years at this point. I've been playing priest on and off since mists. Been healing since vanilla, mostly on a shaman before that. But yeah, let me know, and I can definitely start making some of those videos. My main content is Mythic Plus, but I also do PvP, and I also raid mostly heroic. Okay, so now we're getting towards the end of the dungeon, and everything really starts to hurt, especially this week. The mobs here, these little Shaw guys, have a frontal that hurts really, really bad. And as you can see, our druid is trying to keep them only in front of him to let our melee hit him from the sides. Um, in this latter part of it, those frontals that the tank can't avoid hurt really, really bad. So you'll see me use penance defensively quite a bit. Uh, Normally it's use it offensive, but places like this where the tank just takes so much single target damage, and I just can't heal through atonement, I will just use penance. Here we Shadow Covenant, burn it down. With Thundering, if I have the opposite debuff from the tank, I will always go and clear the tank. Tank's the most important person to get cleared after a healer. Plus, you kind of want the last debuff to be on a DPS so they can get that extra damage. Yeah, when Power with Life crits, it is very, very nice. Basically, if you're able to get it to crit, it's basically a lay on hands with an insanely short cooldown. Uh, but yeah, I am prioritizing crit a good amount over versatility at the moment. Obviously, haste is by far your number one. Crit just tends to feel a little better in lower-ish keys. Verse kind of comes into its own way later. I'm mostly pugging right now, so Verse is kind of at the point where everyone is dodging mechanics that they're supposed to. and only getting hit by unavoidable damage for the most part, which is where Verse is really, really good. Whereas Crit is really good for when people do stand in bad and you have to reverse a bunch of healing. Um, because, yeah, if the whole group really knows what they're doing and you really trust the group, you just take your Verse so you yourself take less damage when you get hit, and generally makes the run a bit easier. So here we're in the last pack before the third boss. Nothing too crazy. Just spread Purge the Wicked as much as possible. Shadow or Death when you can. Another defensive penance. As you can see, those frontals are just hitting him. He has 400k health, and he's getting hit for 100k. So this boss isn't too bad. Tank asks for defensives during the green fire phase, so I will roll out some externals for him as that's happening. I will generally do paint suppression later. I like for boss fights to tend to use Dome as much as possible, but actually I know there's a pretty tough pull coming up right after this boss, and Dome's a 3-minute cooldown, so I would really, really like to have that up. Here, just avoiding the fire. Nothing too crazy. This boss isn't too bad this week. All the damage you take on this boss is mostly avoidable unless you're a tank. Okay, so we're in the green phase, so I am rolling some raptures on him. Oh, I paint suppression him earlier. So now we're almost out of the green phase. It's almost time for Yulon to be summoned, and actually once Yulon is summoned, it's generally much easier. Um, all he really does is a breath, and that's about it that our Demon Hunter still managed to get hit by. And now we're back to just as much DPS as possible. Alright, so this last room hurts really bad. All of the mobs here hit really, really hard, so you have to stay really, really vigilant on your making sure your tank is okay. As you can see, my tank is popping his cooldowns, just kind of like doing what he can to stay alive. Don't get knocked up by Volcanic like I did. Like I said, this run is I'm not super happy with it. I made a lot of mistakes, stepped in a lot of bad. But we had a good group. We got through. Our DPS was really strong. Our tank knew the dungeon really well, so he knew when to roll his cooldowns. So he did a lot of the heavy lifting for me. But this feels really good in this dungeon. This dungeon doesn't really have much kind of like rot fights. It's mostly very predictable bursts of damage that you can just plan ahead for. Another defensive penance. As you can see, these guys hit extremely hard. So this pull, just kind of get through it because the pull after it is the hardest pull in the dungeon probably. Um, we CC one of the little shot things, but you'll see that I basically roll through all my cooldowns on the tank, and he still has to kite to survive. It's pretty absurd how much damage they take. Okay, so yeah, tank knows it's the hardest pull. Here, the one thing I regret is I wish I didn't overlap my cooldowns with the tanks as much as I did. So here you can see he pops one of his defensives, and I immediately also pain suppressioned him. So that kind of just clobbers it. So here he's got another defensive out, so I'm going to wait a little bit. And now we start rolling out some shields. And it is almost time to rapture here. So here comes the damage. So you can see he's already kiting. I threw the dome, but I didn't realize the mob was going to die, so kind of a worthless dome. Rapture here. Just keep refreshing it on the tank as much as possible because he is taking the brunt of the damage here. And now we are down to just the Infestor, which hits hard but is much, much, much more doable than when you have all the other ads. Okay, so mana again before last boss. This boss is a pretty long fight, so we do want to make sure we have full mana. You'll see that by the end of it, I am running low, and I even pop a potion to keep myself in it. Here, you want to dispel as fast as possible. Generally, you should prioritize melee, unless it looks like they have room. In which case, prioritize whoever is lower and is probably going to take more damage. Dispel when you can. Get in close when the shadows show up, so that way they stack up and your DPS can AoE them down. So warrior's got room, so I let him take it for a little longer than I do. Again, try to go to the tank right away. Tank got cleared. Nearly dropped there, so just burn all my defensives. Fade, Desperate Prayer, and Pain Suppression myself. Mass Spell, since it was both on the melee. It's pretty easy to do. Again, stack up to the melee. Let them kind of handle everything. Now that we're all stacked up, bubble. So here, as you can see, I ran out of mana. So I ran out of mana pots, so I had to use one of my pots that lets me free cast. It's the Innervate potions. I forgot what they were called. But yeah, here you just basically get a free Rapture. Your spells cost no mana, but there's a longer cast time. But as of right now in 10.0, that does not affect GCD. So you basically just get free Rapture, and we get them down, and that was the dungeon. Went pretty well. Definitely didn't play my best, but overall it was a good run. Didn't really get any gear out of it, but